What's up, everyone? Welcome into DodgerHeads, presented by DodgerBlue.com. My name is Jeff Spiegel. I'm joined for a special edition today by Daniel Starkand. We've got not necessarily breaking news, but breaking news as it pertains to a big rumor around the Dodgers, as Jim Bowden went on the radio this morning and said that he is predicting that Nolan Arenado, Rockies' third baseman, will be a Dodger by Christmas. Of course, Arenado is the Rockies' third baseman. He's been of interest to the Dodgers for a while, but it's always been a question of would the Rockies trade him in the division. And so the thought is that maybe now things are a little bit different. He's got 1 year left before he has the option to opt out. And this year even, he's due $35 million, followed by another 164 over the 5 seasons if he decides to opt in. John Morosi went on and confirmed the Dodgers have interest in Arenado, who's a lifelong sort of Dodger fan growing up. And many believe because of sort of the $35 million he's owed that the competition is limited. And so I'll say this right up front. Arenado makes a ton of sense, probably for every team in the league, but especially the Dodgers. He's right-handed, which they're desperately looking for a right-handed bat. He plays third base, which is probably the most open spot on the diamond for them. Not to mention that many believe that if he were to be traded to the Dodgers, he would waive his opt-out clause so that he would be coming in with a 6-year contract as well. And I'll just throw this out there. The Dodgers financially going forward are in really good shape. In 2022, there's only 4 guys officially under contract: Mookie, David Price, Max Muncy, and A.J. Pollock. Of course, all the rest of the guys are either arbitration or making the minimum. In 23, David Price is off of that list. In 2024, Mookie Betts is the only player under contract. So I think there's 2 big questions, Daniel, that I'd love to chat with you about. The first is, what does it cost to acquire him? And second, what would a move like this mean long term, where I think that's probably where more interest and fascination comes. So let's get to the acquiring piece. I've seen a bunch of people suggesting that it would cost the Dodgers elite talent: Gavin Lux, Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin, someone in that ilk. And my question to you is, am I crazy for thinking that any suggestion the Dodgers would have to part with elite talent is insane? I mean, I would be shocked if it took elite talent. And I say that if he leaves after next year, the Rockies will get a high draft pick. So the Dodgers can't get him for nothing, even though they're taking $35 million off their hands. But I would be shocked if the Dodgers parted with any top 100 talent. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some different factors to consider here, and we don't really know all the details at this moment. But I think the no trade clause for Arenado is definitely big here, and could kind of help the Dodgers with their leverage, because if he straight up says, "I'm not waiving this no trade clause for anyone but the Dodgers," then Colorado's hands are pretty tied, because he could just opt out next year and they don't get anything for him. So, I mean, it's hard to imagine them wanting to trade him to the Dodgers just because they're in the division. They just won the World Series. The Dodgers are set up to be great long term. But I mean, if that's their only option, you might as well weaken, a division opponent and get something back instead of just losing him for nothing a year from now.
Yeah, and I mean, the Rockies, as you've sort of hinted at, they're not competing next year. And I think it's worth pointing out, they probably don't even want to pay him $35 million this upcoming season because of the financial implications of where most of the league is. So I think those are big. I think the no trade clause, as you mentioned. And again, like, the Dodgers aren't going to get him for free, because the Rockies could just let him sit on their bench for a year and get basically a first or second round pick, depending on how that all shakes out. But the flip side is they'd also have to pay $35 million. So I think the Rockies would be eager to move him. I don't think it's to the Dodgers. So I think the Dodgers would have to give up something, but I would be shocked. I mean, people saying, hey, Lux plus May or Gonsolin, it's like there's no chance the Dodgers are doing anything of that nature.
Yeah, and I guess it also kind of depends on if the Rockies are willing to eat any money of the deal, or if the Dodgers would be picking up his full salary. It's kind of similar to what happened with Giancarlo Stanton a couple years ago. I mean, if the Dodgers are willing to take on all or almost all of that salary, then they wouldn't have to give up Gavin Lux and Gonsolin and 2 other top prospects. It wouldn't be a package like that. They'd have to give up something. I mean, it's Nolan Arenado, but it wouldn't be the crazy prospect cost that we've seen for some other deals. Even I would expect it to be less than even Mookie Betts, just because there there wasn't a whole lot of suitors for him and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think less than Mookie is where I stand. And Verdugo is a really talented guy. I mean, he was a top 100 type person, but I think Verdugo was less valuable in the Dodgers' eyes than May, Gonsolin, and Lux all are. And so I think that gives you context. So let's get to the second piece of this conversation, which is I think where the most interesting piece of it comes, which is what would a move like this mean for the Dodgers long term? I ask because John Morosi, when he was reporting on the interest, he suggested that the Dodgers trading for Arenado would likely be an indication of the future of Corey Seager with the Dodgers. Corey Seager, as we know, due to become a free agent at the end of the season. There have been no reports that his agent, Scott Boras, has been willing to talk extension, seemingly interested in his guy getting to free agency. You're a Seager guy. I mean, we're all Seager guys, but you especially are a Corey Seager person.
Now, yeah.
So what's the case for if you had to choose between Corey Seager and Nolan Arenado? You joked with me on Twitter that you would clearly choose Seager. What's the case for Seager?
Yeah, I mean, well, it goes beyond just Seager, right? So let me start with the short term, and then I'll kind of get into the long term. So Nolan Arenado, he's got 6 years left with an AAV of 32 million, which, like you said, the Dodgers have money. You know, they got money coming off the books pretty soon. They could easily afford that if they want to. But the alternative would be, you know, you could bring back Justin Turner for probably 12 million a year for 2 years, which is 20 million less than what Arenado makes. Which means you could spend that 20 million elsewhere. You could go get a Liam Hendricks. You could go get a Blake Trinan. You could bring back Kike Hernandez. So you got to kind of consider what's going to help you win more. Is it Nolan Arenado for 32 million, or is it Justin Turner plus a couple relievers while also keeping the prospects that it would cost to acquire Nolan Arenado?
Yeah.
And in that same breath, if you do go that route, then now you could afford to maybe pay Corey Seager long term. So I think you just got to consider how good Nolan Arenado is. Obviously, everyone knows he's great, but he does play at Coors Field. He is 30 years old, so technically he's, you know, in the back half of his career at this point.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of factors to consider. I'm personally, like you said, I'm a big Corey Seager guy. I would prefer them signing and keeping Corey Seager long term over Nolan Arenado.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I trust Andrew Friedman's judgment. I trust his vision for this team. So whatever he decides is best, I'm not going to sit here and be mad if they trade for Nolan Arenado.
Yeah, I mean, and you mentioned one of the big differences between the two is age. Arenado is almost exactly 3 years older than Corey Seager. So acquiring Arenado, assuming he were to opt into his entire contract, you would be getting him for his age 30 through his age 35 seasons. Seager is 3 years younger. Let's say, assume that he plays his year and then he were to be re-signed for, say, 7 years, which seems to be kind of the Anthony Rendon type contract. You'd be getting him for his age 28 through 34 seasons as far as what you're paying for in addition to his 27. So I would imagine that Seager's contract a year from now is maybe a tad less than what Arenado is currently making. I could be wrong. That's just based on A, all of the shortstops that potentially could be hitting free agency at the same time, and B, just the fact that the economy now is very different than it was. Now, Mookie Betts' contract tells us that maybe those numbers aren't going down. They could be going in the other direction. But I think those are sort of things to consider. I think the argument for Arenado is primarily based on consistency. Not only do you enter this season knowing that you have a stud under contract for the next 5 years, right? Because if they opt not to do this, Corey Seager, the mystery, and the potential of him just deciding to take a contract elsewhere hovers over them. Arenado, you acquire him, it's like known commodity. You know, I don't know what that stupid phrase is, but one in the hand is better than two in the bush, right? Something like that. But you're also getting a guy in Arenado. So I'm ignoring 2020 because not just because he struggled. It's just a weird, like when you look at numbers, it's hard to quantify what exactly happened. So 2017, 18, and 19, Arenado averaged 5.8 wins above replacement. That mark, his total WAR was 9th in all of baseball over those 3 years. He has 8 Gold Glove awards. He averaged 40 home runs a year from the right side dating back to 2015, okay? Now, Corey Seager, what's interesting is his peak is higher than Arenado. So his 2 best seasons from a WAR perspective were better than anything Arenado has done. The problem is those were in 2016 and 2017. There were down years in 2018 and 2019. 2020, different story, but here's context. Seager, if you just tripled his numbers, would get him to about 156 games played. he was on pace for 5.7 wins above replacement. That's a tad under what Arenado has averaged for the past few years. Now, I'm also not super nerdy when it comes to WAR. I understand that Coors Field, some people think WAR is depressed in Coors Field because everything is adjusted for park. So some think maybe Arenado is actually better than those numbers I'm suggesting. But all that's to say, there's something to be said about the consistency Arenado provides. The fact that he's right-handed is something the Dodgers are interested in. Obviously, I don't think they're wanting to give up a left-handed bat to get a right-handed bat. But I don't know. I don't know where I stand on this. I mean, the emotional piece of Corey Seager, what he just did, is massive for me. And yet at the same time, I think Arenado is a much safer bet for the next 6 years. A, because you'd have him under contract. You know what you're getting to some degree. There's no mystery there, but also just the consistency. I mean, Seager has battled injuries. He has ups and downs. Yes, we're in the midst of an up and a massive up with Seager. I'm convinced that I think it is sustainable, but even if it's sustainable at the 2020 level, you're talking about Nolan Arenado.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know I keep saying a lot that there's a lot of factors
Yeah.
to consider here, but there really are. Like, and as you're talking, as I'm talking, like more are just popping into my head, and it's like you also got to consider like clubhouse
Yeah.
stuff. Like, obviously, Arenado's a great guy, but how is that clubhouse going to feel coming off a World Series if they just say, "Well, see you, Justin Turner, we're bringing in this new guy,"
Yeah.
and then a year from now, see you, Corey Seager. We don't have enough to pay you anymore. So that's something to consider. Something else is obviously Seager and Arenado don't play the same position. So if you're bringing in Arenado, it wouldn't be an issue in 2021 because you'll still have both, which would be just an absolute ridiculous left side of the infield. And you could probably hand the Dodgers the 2021 World Series trophy right now if that's the case. But after that, who's your shortstop long term? Is it Gavin Lux? Is it Cody Hose, who's on the way up and reports indicate he's been working out at short more? So that's something you're going to have to figure out as well. Obviously, Arenado's arguably the best defensive third baseman in baseball, so you'll be set at third for a while. But I mean, shortstop's as important of a position as it gets. So, and also, I mean, if you're going to sign Seager long term, is he your shortstop? We don't even know that. There's been talks about him potentially moving to third or first. So, yeah, there's so much to consider here. But I mean, to me, it's a win-win for the Dodgers. Like, I just love seeing them involved. Anytime a superstar is available on the trade market, I don't see why their name shouldn't at least be in the mix.
Yeah.
If anything, they raise the price for another team. We know they got great prospects, so anytime the Dodgers want to pull a trigger on a deal, they're more than capable of doing it.
Yeah, and I mean, I think your point is fair. Of if you don't trade for Arenado, that probably gives you more money to spend this offseason, obviously. And I almost wonder if I mean, obviously they don't play the same position, so you don't have to choose between Arenado and Seager. Right. I almost wonder if it's like an insurance policy. We talk about Buehler, Bellinger, and Seager, the three guys the Dodgers are going to have to extend over the next 3 years. I almost wonder if you acquire Arenado, it's like, okay, we already have one, so then we can negotiate fairly with Seager, and if we can get a reasonable deal done, great. Then then you just kick the can down the road and say, well, now there's less pressure on us to sign Bellinger, and now there's less pressure on us to sign Buehler. Now, I mean, what do you do at that point? Like, are they comfortable signing four? Because most people, I think, I should say, I think Buehler would be my priority. He's the last one to come available, so you can't just keep kicking it down and then say, well, sorry, Buehler, we paid everybody else. But I think there's a lot of factors. I'll preface all of this to say this is a massive rumor. Jim Bowden predicts it to be done by Christmas. Jim Bowden is not perfect in his predictions, so far from it. But it is interesting. We know the Dodgers have been interested, which is why we're talking about it, because it's not crazy to think. So we'd love comment below. Let us know what you think about the prospect of Nolan Arenado. What would you need? What would be too expensive to give up? Would you prefer him to Corey Seager? Let us know in the comments. So make sure you're following DodgerBlue.com, DodgerBlue1958 on all the social media. We'll have updates on all of those things. So that's Daniel. I'm Jeff. We appreciate you joining us for this Dodger Head Short, and we will see you next time.